The White House press briefing room was filled with reporters eager to dissect the latest developments in national politics. As cameras rolled and journalists prepared their questions, the atmosphere crackled with anticipation. At the podium stood Karoline Leavitt, poised and confident, ready to field inquiries on behalf of the administration. The discussion was expected to cover a range of topics, but one question in particular set the stage for an unexpected exchange. A well-known liberal journalist, positioned near the front, took the microphone. With a measured yet insistent tone, she pressed Leavitt on a controversial statement made by the president regarding the validity of certain executive pardons from the previous administration. The assertion had sparked widespread debate, with many questioning whether legal precedent supported the claim. The journalist sought clarity, asking for concrete evidence or documentation that would substantiate the president's position. Leavitt, ever composed, listened intently before responding. She reiterated the administration's commitment to transparency, but also emphasized that the issue at hand required further scrutiny. Rather than providing immediate answers, she turned the focus back onto the journalist, subtly challenging the press to investigate the matter themselves. Her words were deliberate, carrying the weight of both authority and deflection. The room grew quieter as the exchange unfolded. Other reporters shifted in their seats, sensing the tension between the two women. The journalist, undeterred, pressed again, seeking a direct answer. This time, Leavitt's demeanor shifted slightly. Her expression firmed, her voice took on a sharper edge. "That's something you should be looking into," she remarked, implying that the role of the press was to seek truth rather than demand it from the podium. The moment encapsulated the evolving dynamic between the administration and certain media figures. For some, it reflected an effort to push back against narratives perceived as biased. For others, it was an attempt to sidestep tough questions. Regardless of interpretation, the interaction underscored the ongoing challenge of communication between political leaders and the press. In the background, journalists scribbled notes capturing every nuance of the exchange. Some whispered among themselves, speculating on whether the moment would fuel further debate in the media cycle. The tension was palpable, a microcosm of the broader ideological divides shaping the national conversation. Despite the pointed nature of the questioning, Leavitt maintained control of the room. She moved on to the next inquiry without allowing the moment to spiral into a prolonged confrontation. However, the impact of the exchange lingered. Political analysts would later dissect it, drawing conclusions about the administration's media strategy and the press's role in holding power to account. As the briefing continued, the room gradually returned to its usual rhythm, but the exchange had left its mark. It was another chapter in the ongoing interplay between the White House and the media, a reminder of the delicate balance between transparency, accountability, and political maneuvering. The air in the White House press briefing room was thick with anticipation as journalists prepared their questions. The administration had been navigating a whirlwind of political challenges, and the press was eager to scrutinize its every move. As Karoline Leavitt stood at the podium, her expression remained composed, her posture unwavering. She had handled tough questions before, but today's briefing would take a sharper turn. A journalist, known for her assertive questioning, took the floor. Her voice was calm, but carried an unmistakable edge as she addressed Leavitt. The topic at hand was a claim made by the president regarding the validity of certain executive pardons issued by the previous administration. The journalist pressed for specifics, asking whether there was concrete evidence to support the president's assertion that these pardons might not hold legal weight. Leavitt met the question with a measured response, emphasizing the administration's stance while deflecting direct confirmation. Her words were carefully chosen, balancing firmness with restraint. The journalist, unsatisfied, pushed further. She demanded clarification, asking whether the White House had legal documentation to back the president's position. The room, which had been buzzing with the sounds of shuffling papers and quiet murmurs, fell silent. The tension was growing, the interaction transforming into a battle of persistence versus authority. Leavitt's demeanor sharpened. "I think that's something you should be looking into," she said, her tone clipped but controlled. The response was not a refusal to answer, but it was far from the direct confirmation the journalist was seeking. The exchange was no longer just about policy. It had become a test of dominance in the room, a subtle power struggle playing out in real time. The journalist, undeterred, attempted once more to extract a definitive statement. Her questions became more pointed, her tone more urgent. But Leavitt was prepared. She reiterated her previous stance, holding firm to the administration's position without giving in to pressure. She projected confidence, turning the narrative back onto the press, suggesting that investigative journalism should take precedence over demanding answers in a public forum. A few reporters exchanged glances. Some nodded in approval of Leavitt's handling of the moment, while others furiously jotted down notes recognizing the exchange as something that would make headlines. The balance of power in the room had shifted. What started as a journalist seeking answers had turned into a demonstration of the administration's control over its messaging. The atmosphere remained charged even as Leavitt transitioned to the next question. Though the moment had passed, its significance lingered. It was a reflection of the administration's approach to media relations, a glimpse into the strategic maneuvering that defined its interactions with the press. The confrontation had escalated beyond a simple policy question. It had become an example of the delicate dance between those in power and those tasked with holding them accountable. The press briefing room was filled with the usual clatter of reporters arranging their notes, cameras adjusting their angles, and murmurs of discussion as they awaited the arrival of Karoline Leavitt. As she stepped up to the podium, her expression was unreadable, poised and professional, yet carrying an edge of determination. It was clear she anticipated the confrontations that would unfold in the coming minutes. The briefing moved through a series of standard questions, covering economic policies and legislative proposals before the tone shifted. A journalist known for her persistence raised a question that had been swirling in the media. It concerned the president's assertion that certain executive pardons from the previous administration might not be legally valid. The journalist pressed for specifics, asking whether the White House had solid evidence to support this claim, or if it was merely speculation. Leavitt took a breath, her hands resting lightly on the podium. "The American people deserve transparency," she began, choosing her words carefully. "And that's exactly what we're committed to providing." It was a diplomatic opening, but the journalist was not deterred. She followed up asking if the White House had conducted any internal review or sought legal counsel on the matter. Leavitt's expression remained firm, but her tone took on a sharper edge. "I would encourage you to look into it yourself," she said, her voice carrying a challenge. The statement sent a ripple through the room. It was a subtle but deliberate shift, placing the responsibility back onto the media rather than offering a direct response. The journalist, unfazed, pressed again. "Are you saying there is no evidence at this time?" The question was pointed, designed to pin down a definitive answer. But Leavitt, unwavering, repeated her stance. "I think you and your colleagues have the resources to investigate this matter further," she said. A murmur spread among the reporters. Some exchanged quick glances, recognizing the exchange as more than just a policy discussion. It had become a test of boundaries. Who would dictate the flow of information, the administration or the press? The journalist did not relent. "So, you're suggesting the press should confirm the president's claims rather than the White House providing the evidence?" The question was bold, framed to elicit a reaction. Leavitt didn't flinch. "I'm suggesting that responsible journalism involves thorough investigation," she replied, her voice even but firm. The exchange underscored the ongoing friction between the administration and the media. It highlighted a strategic approach. Rather than engaging in a direct debate over facts, Leavitt had positioned herself as the one guiding the conversation, redirecting scrutiny outward rather than inward. As she moved on to the next question, the tension lingered. The interaction had not yielded the straightforward confirmation the journalist had sought, but it had revealed something just as significant. A deliberate maneuver to shift responsibility, challenging the press to dig deeper, rather than expecting answers to be handed to them. The press briefing room had an energy that felt different from the usual daily exchanges. There was an unspoken expectation in the air, an awareness that the administration and the press were once again at odds over a contentious issue. Karoline Leavitt took her place at the podium, exuding the same composed confidence she had become known for. She was ready for whatever the room had to throw at her. A journalist, seated near the front, wasted no time in bringing up the controversy that had dominated recent headlines. The question centered on the president's claim that certain executive pardons issued by the previous administration might not be legally valid. It was a statement that had ignited fierce debate, with legal experts and political analysts weighing in from all sides. The journalist wanted to know whether the White House had any concrete proof to support this claim, or if it was merely a political talking point. Leavitt listened intently, her expression unreadable. When she finally spoke, her tone was measured but firm. The American people deserve to know the truth, and that's why we encourage a thorough review of this matter. It was a response designed to acknowledge the controversy without directly answering the question. The journalist, not satisfied, pushed further. "Has the administration conducted any legal review of these pardons?" she asked. The room fell silent, waiting for a definitive response. Instead, Leavitt leaned into a familiar strategy. "I think that's something the press should be investigating," she said. Her words were delivered smoothly, but their meaning was unmistakable. A slight murmur spread through the room. The journalist, refusing to let the moment slip away, countered quickly. "Isn't it the White House's responsibility to provide clarity on the president's claims?" she asked, her voice carrying a note of frustration. Leavitt remained unshaken. "We believe in transparency," she replied, "and that includes encouraging rigorous investigative journalism to uncover all aspects of this issue." The response was polished, but it also reinforced a clear message. If the press wanted answers, they would have to go find them. The tension in the room thickened. Other journalists took note of the dynamic at play. This was more than a simple back and forth over a policy question. It was a reflection of a larger, ongoing struggle between the administration and the press. The journalist was demanding accountability, while Leavitt was subtly pushing back, shifting the responsibility elsewhere. Some in the room recognized the tactic immediately. It wasn't a refusal to engage, but it also wasn't a direct answer. It was a strategic maneuver, one that allowed the administration to maintain control of the narrative without becoming bogged down in specifics. As the exchange continued, it became clear that this moment was emblematic of the broader tensions that had defined the administration's relationship with the press. Every question, every response, every moment of pushback spoke to a deeper divide, a battle over who controlled the narrative and who had the power to shape public perception. As the press briefing moved forward, the atmosphere in the room remained charged. The exchange between Karoline Leavitt and the journalist had set the tone for the remainder of the session. Though the conversation had shifted to other topics, the tension lingered, an unspoken acknowledgement that the battle between the administration and the press was far from over. Journalists continued to press for answers, each one taking a slightly different approach, some more aggressive, others more measured. But the pattern was clear. Leavitt maintained control, sticking to the administration's messaging while redirecting scrutiny back onto the media. It was a tactic that had been employed before, yet each time it played out, it served as a reminder of the ongoing power struggle between those in office and those tasked with holding them accountable. Outside the briefing room, the moment was already making waves. Clips of the exchange were being analyzed, dissected, and debated on news broadcasts and social media. Supporters of the administration saw it as a demonstration of strength, proof that the White House would not be bullied into conceding to media narratives. Critics, on the other hand, viewed it as yet another attempt to evade direct accountability, a strategic effort to avoid answering difficult questions. The debate extended beyond the immediate players in the room. Political analysts weighed in, some arguing that the administration's approach to media relations was a necessary strategy in a polarized landscape. while others contended that refusing to directly address tough questions only deepened public mistrust. Legal experts joined the discussion, examining whether the claims in question had any legal merit and whether the press should indeed be the ones investigating, or if the White House had an obligation to present evidence. Despite the differing perspectives, one thing was undeniable. The exchange had reinforced the already growing tensions between the administration and the press. It had become a reflection of the broader political climate, a climate where trust in institutions was fragile, where narratives were shaped as much by what was left unsaid as by what was openly stated. For Leavitt, the moment had been another test in an already challenging role. As one of the youngest press secretaries in history, she was no stranger to scrutiny. Each press briefing was a high-stakes performance, requiring a delicate balance of control, composure, and strategic deflection. In this instance, she had succeeded in maintaining the administration's position without yielding ground, but the exchange had also added another layer to the ongoing discourse about transparency, accountability, and the role of the media. The briefing wrapped up and reporters gathered their notes, the underlying questions remained. Who ultimately bore the responsibility for uncovering the truth? Was it the role of the press to chase down every claim? Or did the administration have an obligation to provide evidence when making assertions? The answers depended on perspective, but what was clear was that this was not the last time such a confrontation would unfold. The battle between the press and those in power was an enduring one, and each exchange only set the stage for the next.